Welcome. This is the Backend Bear Podcast, where we discuss anything related to programming, algorithms, and the latest practices in the coding world. So sit back, grab a drink, enjoy, and let's dig right into it. How's it going, people? Hope you're having a great start of the week. You're programming hard, and you're putting 9 times the developer and that 10 times the developer. Yeah, I know, the joke never gets old. If you want to learn more about it, it's on Twitter. It's still exploding, apparently. But hope you're having a great week. And of course, you can't wait for Friday to come in. So this week we have Al Rodriguez with us. If you remember on the last episode with Jared Porcenelik, he pitched in his name, and I asked Al to be on this episode. And it was a great episode. We talked a bit about programming, coding, management, of course, the usual. And of course, we talked a lot about Arduino, IoT, and how to get started. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I think we're ready. Okay. Hey Al Rodriguez, hey Al Rodriguez, hey Al Rodriguez, welcome to the show. Hey Al Rodriguez, hey Al Rodriguez, hey Al Rodriguez, welcome to the show. Then you hear for IoT, he has passion. Take his hand. He'll show us a place where connection never ends. Through the cloud, Arduino's way, on array of bytes, flying through the air. It is open source, so join the serenade. One board to rule them all.
It was really hard for me to hold back some laughter there. Thank you for that serenade. I am already loving being on this show. Hi.
Hi. So, as you heard, this is I have Al Rodriguez as a guest today, and this what at least I attempted to try with my screeching sound voice. I mean, is I found a theme for the SeaWorld park, so I rewrote the lyrics in a way. So
okay. Gotcha.
So it was fun, but yeah, I just like to kick it off a bit of laughter and relax us a bit. So today we have Al Rodriguez with us. He works at SeaWorld. He's also one of the organizers of the IoT meetup here in Orlando. He likes to work with Arduino. And is there anything I missed, Al? So would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, sure. So as you heard my name many times in that awesome serenade, I'm Al Rodriguez. IoT embedded style development is kind of my passion. It's not something I really do for my day job. On that side of things, I'm full-on C#.NET programmer, mostly back-end type of stuff. But my afternoon work at home, stuff that I always get to choose to do, is usually a lot more low-level than that, which sometimes fun, when you finally get to make that LED blink, and sometimes hair pulling because it's a lot harder to debug issues than I'm usually used to.
Just like any hobby, I have to say. So,
Yeah.
One thing I have to say, I'm really jealous that SeaWorld is just, I can throw a rock from my place to SeaWorld, so I'm really close by you guys, and I have to drive all the way to Altamont Springs every day, so it's like I'm cutting through Orlando just to get to my job. So I'm kind of jealous that you guys are so close. But anyway, so yeah, what got you into programming? Can you tell me that?
Yeah. So, I mean, programming in general. So I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show BattleBots.
No, I don't know that.
Oh, okay, cool. So it's back now. When I was a kid, like roughly 12, 13, somewhere in that general time age, there was a show on Comedy Central called BattleBots, and people built their robots and they competed against each other. And so that had a couple of seasons. Then it was off the air for a long time, and now it's back on Discovery Channel. They've been playing it for a couple of seasons now, and I think it's on right now during the summer. Um, so I realized I didn't ask you when this episode's going out, but it might be on right now. So I guess check your local listings. But when I was a kid, I loved that show, and it really made me want to become a mechanical engineer because that's how you build the robot to fight other robots to the death. And that didn't work out so well. I started going down that little path for mechanical engineering and realized there's a lot of stuff on here I don't like. But you know what I do like? Computers. And that'll also help me build a robot. So I just went down the whole computer programming route, and here I am in my early 30s and still have not built a robot to fight other robots to the death. But that's still on the bucket list. Someday that'll happen.
You're almost there. Like you're almost there. But so like any hobby, we have to have like a day job on the side, right? So you're at SeaWorld. I'm really curious to know, like, what do you do there, and how do you do there? I would like to know a bit more about the team and how many are there of you.
Yeah, sure. So there's a handful of people. So on my side, on my team, as far as developers go, there's five of us, and we're essentially the team that manages the customer facing applications. So if you go to SeaWorld.com, it's a whole .NET application, and we manage that's the application that hosts that site. It's also an application that hosts other sites too. Essentially, all of the parks that are run by or uh, are owned by SeaWorld, that company, which I forget. There's a whole thing, but there's the other parks. There's the Busch Gardens Park. There's the Sesame Street Park in Philadelphia. So we manage and maintain all of those applications, plus a few back-end services that also interact with some other services too that are kind of internal things like admissions, making sure if you buy a ticket you can get in the park, that kind of stuff. And so that's all C#.NET style of application. As far as comparing this size team to other teams that I've worked with at other companies, it's pretty much like I would say a nice medium-sized team. About the average is what I'm assuming. At least the average compared to all of the other companies that I've worked at before. They've all usually kind of been in that 5 to 7 range, somewhere in that area. But yeah, I mean, there's a team of us on developers. We still have all your other standard roles. We've got a QA team that we work closely with, and they're testing the applications, the features, etc. We have business analysts, project managers, all of them that we're working with closely. So yeah, kind of the standard what I think of as medium to large business sort of layout, right? Where you have a couple of teams that are still kind of separate, but they're still working together. They're not super large enterprise where we're in different cities working together to work on the same product. Then again, working in different cities isn't bad, as long as you're able to communicate with each other. Yeah, that always works out.
Yeah, for example, I used to work visit.com. That was a long time ago, like in 2012, and it was like a 40-man developer team. Sounds a lot, I know. But we had a team like in Belgrade, Serbia. We had a team in Oslo. We had a team in Sweden, Stockholm. We had a team in France, Paris, and all of us kind of worked together, and we kind of used the same chat client. And that was even before Slack, so it was like we had, like, I forgot what the name was. I think it was Spark or something like that. But yeah, it's possible. I mean, in big teams like that, to work, and even when you're like separate all over the place. So the important communication, like you have like 5 different teams who speak like completely different languages, but still we kind of communicated via English and understood each other. So that's that's pretty cool. And now I'm in kind of the same boat as you are. So it's like a 5 to 10 developer team. I'm leading that, and then we have our business analyst, we have our sales team, we have our upper management. So it's kind of structured the same way. In a way. So with that, like, I would like to know, like, do you guys like enforce like code ethics, or do you have like a coding standard? Do you apply like code reviews? Are you like clean code aficionados, or just like let it roll with it and just stick it to the wall? So kind of approach.
Well, it kind of depends. Is the answer for that one? So I guess I would say that for the most part, right now, we like historically, as far as how the team's been working, it's kind of been um, you know, everyone does their own thing. You get the code checked in, and then at the end of a sprint is when we do a code review. Um, Something that we want to make a change is that hopefully soon we're actually going to start using Git instead of previously we've been using Team Foundation version control, the one that comes with Microsoft's TFS product. And so once we make that move, our plan is to start doing code reviews and all that stuff with PRs, with pull requests for Git. So the idea is that we'll have the main branch, and then whenever we need to work on a feature or a bug or anything, we'll make our feature branch work on things, and then create the pull request into main. So then we'll have at least one or two people kind of start doing a code review to make sure that that can actually merge in. And my goal personally is that hopefully that leads to some other things like some more code uniformity, that kind of stuff. Because historically, for the project that we work on, the it hasn't really had a lot of that. There's been a lot of people over time, that sort of deal. It's one of the applications is a lot more legacy than the others, and so that one you can tell, right? You can usually tell when there's a project that's had a lot of people working on it over time, and where they weren't as rigid with certain coding standards. And so hopefully over time we'll be able to kind of get that up. And honestly, that's my goal. At least I know some other people on my team have that same thought process. So fingers crossed we'll get to that, and see how that goes. Hopefully we'll have a nice case study for that. I'd love to talk to people on how that worked, that transition went, that kind of stuff. That's always cool, right? Seeing the end result of the painful changes that happen.
Yeah, I know exactly. And I'm kind of going through those pains right now. Like where I landed now currently is I'm dealing with like a 25-year-old code base, right? So there's a lot of legacy, and like you said, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and there weren't standards before so much. So now I was tasked to move the entire solution like to the cloud, right? So then I had to like go through that old code, get a big shovel and just start digging and just figuring out what's going on and moving it to the cloud. So, and it's fun. Let me put it like that. So, and I do now a lot of code reviews because I was also tasked with like a bunch of, I have junior developers underneath me. So I was tasked of also doing the code review and kind of being the mentor. So now with the code reviews, I'm more strict. Like I'm doing it on every task. I'm allowing them to merge into development branch. So the way we have branches set up, it's like master, development, and release. So that's how we do it. So development, what we're currently working on, master is final before the release, and the release is like a snapshot in time. And so I'm overviewing every task and going through a lot of pains of dealing with bad code. Let me put it like that. So which brings me to the next question. Do you guys, how do you guys deal with bad code? On my end, I have, I'm kind of trying to deal with that and trying to tone it down in a way, because developers kind of take it too hard too much. And, I'm trying to just unify the code base and trying to make standards. So I'm not trying to be, the bad guy in the whole approach. So I'm wondering, like, how do you guys deal with bad code, if you guys deal with it at all, in a way?
Well, I think everyone has to deal with bad code, right? Because in my mind, the bad code is. I mean, I don't like calling it that. Just because there's a reason code ended up in that state, right? Maybe there's actually a good reason. Did that code end up in that state because someone was was assuming X, but it turned out that Y was true, and they'd already put in a bunch of time, and so now they had to make some changes last minute. That's always entirely possible. Or maybe this code looked this way for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden there were a handful of changes by different people. Maybe something wasn't commented well. There's a lot of reasons why something would be called bad code. Uh, but as far as dealing with that in an application, if it's an existing application that you kind of plopped into and you're working on, my strategy is always refactor where possible. If it's easy, if it's simple, you might as well do that, right? Because spending a little bit of upfront time now is going to save you later on. Uh, and it is always so tempting, right? When you see, like, for example, in C sharp, you're following like camel casing or Pascal casing, and then you get to that one file where it's the opposite, where it doesn't follow it, and it drives you crazy, and that's something you really want to change. Um, um, I always have to fight myself on if it's worth it making those changes. If I'm making changes to that file anyway, then you might as well. But um, yeah, I mean, whenever you see code that has its issues, um, at a minimum, you want to remember that this is something that you want to change later. And actually, so that's something that I do like, that I hadn't really noticed specifically at some other companies that I had worked for. So one of the things that we're doing on this team is, if we see something like this that we know needs a big refactor, we write up a user story within Azure DevOps, and that goes into the backlog. When we work on that, that's a whole other story. But we definitely make sure to put a lot of effort into at least writing up the fact that this needs to happen, and eventually we'll get that time to work on it. Eventually when that happens, right? But
Oh, so you kind of write up a task, basically, that the code is bad, or give it an example why the code is bad in that way. I mean, the way I do it, like, I stop everything, like, hey, halt, come over here, like, and then I usually try to give them, like, a negative example. Not a negative example, like, emotionally negative. It's like negative example why your solution breaks. Like, let's say, if you pass a null here, your code will break, or something like that, something along those lines. Then with that, I'm trying to teach them also along the way, like, how to think. But I think I like your approach more, that, like, hey, okay, this is bad, write up a use case, this is bad because of this and that, and then create a new task, and then assign it to that particular developer, and then they can either pick it up or later down the road, or someone else can pick it up and clean it up, like, down the road. So I think I like that idea, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're in the middle of a code review, style, then that's the perfect time to bring it up, right? Mention it there, because the code itself is fresh on the developers' minds. Everyone's kind of ready for that. But if this is something that you notice later on, then maybe it's not the right time to work on it. Maybe you've already delegated all of the time for your sprint, and you don't want to just add something in the middle, if that's what matters, right? If you're trying to be agile, as agile as possible, then hey, maybe it turns out that fixing this thing is way more important than some other issues that you want to work on during that time. So that's always one of those balancing acts, right, that we always have, that we always see the advice online, and then we have to decide if we want to follow it or not, sort of deals. So yeah, I guess every situation works, or every solution works to a degree, and then you're just picking and choosing. So now you have to decide, which of these do I actually want to follow, for picking, do I fix the code now, later, etc.
Yeah, usually I run into some kind of a loop, and that's like, run into something bad, then I call in the developer, tell him what to do, and then I start working on my end, and then the same solution gets back, and then I find something else, and then goes back and forth, and I'm kind of entering in the loop, and it takes me time. If I'm concentrating on one piece of code, right, it takes me time to concentrate on something else, because it's a different mindset, or is doing a completely different problem. So, like, mentally, it takes me a time to get into it. Like when I get deep into the code, I kind of concentrate on it. And now what I'm entering in a kind of loop, I'm doing like these code reviews like for 3-4 developers that are returning the code because they do it like in 5 minutes, right? Or in an hour. So I'm constantly getting back those feedback. So I think it's better like to like create a task, list everything that's bad in it, and then just, let them fix it and then do another code review, but not going back and forth constantly, because I have one developer, for example, where I returned the task like 18 times or 19 times. So I even counted it was that bad. But and it's not developer's fault. It's just that it's a learning process. It's a junior, so there are a lot of topics that the person needed to understand, and separation of concerns and single responsibility, and then all the solid principles and all that jazz. So and it's like an onion. I'm peeling it off like layer by layer, and then I'm figuring out more and more dirt underneath it. So that's how I approach it. So testing. So you said you got a big QA team. So how does that work? So you have a QA team that constantly like clicks around the application and then reports anything wrong, or is it like new feature comes out and then they test all of that out and then report? How do you guys organize and run that?
Well, actually, it's pretty much what the both of those two things that you said. So, our as it stands right now, the QA team that I work with are very manual in the processes that they're following. So, they have a set of test cases that they follow through on. If there's a new feature that's created, then they work on creating and whatever test cases they need for that, add it to the whole test script later on whenever they do a full regression of the application. Um, and so a lot of that is manually clicking on the website and typing in some fields. But as a team, one of the things that they're trying to move to is a lot of test automation, and that's something that's taking time. So there's a lot of different types of automation. So right now they're starting with UI testing. I believe we're using Selenium for that, which I've used in the past, and I'm a big fan of because it was nice and easy to kind of get started with. But they're creating the whole regression suite right now with that. Not too sure on the progress, but it's one of those things that once you have a really good regression suite for an entire application, like you're feeling way good about anything that you throw out there, right? Because maybe it takes a few hours to run, but it's testing everything.
I'm trying to help developers wrap their minds around testing, and right, starting off with the test, like that's the best approach. I mean, even for me, it's kind of hard sometimes to start off with the test. I just like to get my hands dirty, but
oh yeah, I'm a big fan of starting tests everywhere, right? Unit testing, I big fan of, of unit testing. When I'm working on my own like side projects at home, I add tests to that too, because I don't want to spend that extra amount of time debugging something that broke that I got working last week. So just starting there and then working my way out is uh, always great. I don't know if you've ever heard of continuous testing tools, or I think there's a different phrase, continuous runners for your unit tests. Yeah,
yeah,
okay. So Crunch is the one that I use personally. Like I own a personal license to this tool to continually run my unit tests, just because I want to continually see the results of running those tests after I change any code.
one, like, to me, like a bit of controversial topic is lately that there's a lot of push about introvert extrovert type of a person. Personally, I don't think in order to succeed, you need communication. It just, you cannot be a complete introvert. So at the workplace, do you see like introvert extrovert type of separation or a problem, or do people need to communicate constantly to to succeed in a way to make it to improve their skills, right? You cannot be all to yourself like nonstop.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that communication is important for well, pretty much, yeah, for success. As a species, as humans, we thrive when we communicate, right? Because every individual person has their ideas, and if one person has a thought X and another person has thought Y, well, maybe the actual solution is the combination of the two, or maybe the third person who's listening to both X and Y realizes, oh, X has its problems, Y has its problems, but now that we've thought of the problems, now we can think of the actual solution. And just from a perspective of just software development by itself, yeah, I think communication is hugely important. And I say that as a person who is traditionally introverted. I'm not very outspoken for a handful of reasons. One, I'm just bad at conversation. Something that I'll usually go back to is, "Hey, how's it going?" Then pause, and then, "Okay, I'm really bad at conversation, so bye." and uh, so that's something that I personally I should spend more time working on, right, and figure out how to get a little bit better about that. Um, but then
Well,
I think
well, you start a podcast. I mean, in a way, right? So it kind of helps you communicate. I mean, I had a talk with Lee like on the last interview, and we had a talk about that where I personally, like for example, I knew that I was bad at communication. I'm the same way. Like I'm an introvert. I don't like people, but I kind of learned the hard way. Not the hard way, but I learned that communication is the key, and I need to work on it. So what better way to work on it than go in a band, like start singing, like start being a lead vocalist, right, or something like that. So it's like I kind of forced myself. I put myself in an awkward situation where I would have to learn that. And the same goes with the podcast. With the podcast, I'm learning like different techniques when I'm speaking, expressing myself, expressing my ideas, and with every episode, I'm getting better and better. Right. Same goes for you, I'm sure. So it's like that's the thing, that things that we do to battle our being an introvert, right? To kind of, we need to learn how to talk to other people. You just cannot, say like, yeah, I'm an introvert and do nothing about it. If you want to do something in the programming world or coding, have a coding career, you need a bit of communication. That's why I got where I got, because I can communicate with the management on normal terms. So you're kind of bridging that gap between the tech world and the management world. So, and that's the key, I think, to
oh
success
yeah,
in a way.
definitely. And just kind of to flip that around too, whenever we talk about communication, the big thing that we always think of is communicating our ideas to someone else. But it's also equally as important, at least, to be able to listen and understand what other people are saying. And one of the things that I've been trying very hard to do recently is, because I'm introverted and don't speak out very much, is to try and at least get more into other people's shoes and understand where they're coming from, right? Because it's very easy to think, oh, this person on this other team that I don't talk to very often is um just wasting time on this thing, until you start thinking like, okay, where are they coming from, why might they be saying this, and start thinking of possible reasons, and you think, oh, okay, well, I guess this does make a lot more sense. And once you get into their shoes and understand that more, if you're spending more time on that, then that really helps you also. That increases your um, communication level, I guess, right? The listening, the understanding of what they're saying. And so mainly, I have to say that it's kind of a laziness thing on my side, because it's easier to just listen than it is to get better at the talking part. So someday I'll work more on the talking, but for now, listening is kind of where I'm focusing.
Like that saying goes, like God gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? To listen. And I'm at exactly the same point. I'm trying now. I learned to talk, but now I need to learn to listen also as well. So, and with that being said, so do you like more of a? You've been around the block quite a few times, so a difference. Do you prefer more like a corporate startup or corporate or a startup environment? Like,
Um, okay, so I've never worked on startup exactly, but I have worked for smaller companies, and I gotta say, it it kind of depends on my mood. Is what I really hate giving the it depends answer. Overall, personally, I probably enjoy more of the smaller company sort of deal from a pure perspective of just looking at the different points. Um, with a smaller company, you usually have a little bit more freedom of things, and there's also good to having less freedoms of certain things, right? Like maybe it's better that some technologies aren't set in stone within the applications that you're working on, that kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, it's one of those things that, from my side of things, yeah, um, it's a lot more freeing to be able to decide, hey, this one-off project we're working on over here, I'd rather work on try it out with this other technology. Let me make a business case for it, and we'll see. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's try it out, and then see where that leads, or hopefully it leads somewhere well.
yeah, the way I see it is like in a big company, you get a more specialized position in a way. So you're kind of in one part of the code, but in a smaller company, you can wear many hats, right? So that's kind of what also like helped me in my career, propelled me like because I wore many hats and I kind of picked up a lot of skills here and there. We all start off like some start off as front end developers, some start off as back end developers, but with time we kind of build it up, build that skill set. And then eventually we become either full stack developers or even managers and stuff like that. So, the knowledge is the key. Wherever, as much as we can pick up along the way, that's the best. So I think the best way is starting off at a big company, like in a small section, and then, going to a small company if you want to expand. But it's not easy also getting into a big company. So big company has like harder rules of getting in, like looking at you, like Facebook, Google, and so on. So we're whiteboard questions and all of that stuff. So if you're good at that, I'm horrible, by the way. So horrible interviews. I always like deer in the headlights step of things. So that's not my cup of tea.
Oh, same here. Yeah, I always have issues on that.
Yeah, but let's kick it off to the main topic and what kind of brought you here. So you said you like to work with Arduino a lot. And so for those who don't know, would you kind of explain what it is? So kind of introduce them to Arduino.
Yeah, sure. So an Arduino is a little embedded board that you can work on, and I guess technically the name Arduino is kind of used for two separate products, but they really are just for working with the same thing. So physically, the Arduino board is the device that you can program and write your code that runs directly on it. So it's not something like a Raspberry Pi, because a Raspberry Pi has a full-on operating system running on it, and so there's a lot of other stuff there. The thing that is shared between an Arduino and a Raspberry Pi is the fact that they have exposed pins, and then you can plug things into those pins, and you can write code that works with that. So um, at a very low level, every pin is either going to be an output pin or an input pin, and so you're either going to write something out to it, like to turn a little light bulb on, or you're going to read something in from it, like a sensor, right? And maybe get data about the temperature outside or something to that effect. And so an Arduino um, is a lot more low level, because the only code that's actually running on it is the code that you've written. And there's pros and cons to that concept. But for the most part, a lot of times it's pros. But like I said, it completely depends on where you're going. So because it's this just a single MCU, a microcontroller unit, it has a way less. power than something like a full-on Raspberry Pi, because I'm looking at the two that I have on my desk right now, and they are both 8-bit CPUs, and I want to say they're 8 megahertz clock speed versus something like what's running on your laptop right now. I'm sure is multiple cores, almost 3 gigahertz. 64 bits, right? So when you start looking at the difference between those two, it's very, very different in power.
So, what do you need to get started with Arduino? Is there some kind of a starter kit or something like that where people can just plug in? Is it easy to pick up or no?
Oh yeah, oh definitely. If you go online right now on honestly just about any retail website, oh, okay. Let me rephrase that. If you go online right now and just search for Arduino, yeah, you can find a ton of kits. You can, if you go to Arduino's website, they have some links also for where they recommend buying those. So as far as kind of getting started, there are actually a handful of different Arduino boards, just different types, and honestly, any of them can get you really far. Um, whichever one you end up choosing. I'm not going to list all the different kinds, mostly because I don't know them, but also just because over the years there have been so many, and the reason why the Arduino is the one that we're talking about is because it's so popular. It's kind of become the de facto prototyping board, just for creating a quick application. And so buying a board online, you can get a board just on its own, or you can get one with a starter kit. It comes with a bunch of wires, some resistors, LEDs, some buttons, that kind of stuff. And so that's all the hardware. And then separately, as far as doing the code, you're going to need to download the Arduino IDE from Arduino's website. Um, and so this is its own specialized code editor that's specific for Arduino. And the good thing about it, like one of the reasons why the Arduino is so popular is because it's very friendly to beginners, very friendly to working on quick and simple projects. And so the editor itself has a pretty much everything inside of it as far as working with whatever board you're working on. So that's why I said if you go online and you just buy an Arduino board, you can buy any of those because the IDE knows what it needs to do for the board that you're using. Um, because if you've ever worked on something that's very custom, or that's not not an Arduino, you have to start looking things up and data sheets and other standards. Start going through a bunch of documentation, and no one wants to do that. That's never fun. So you pull up the Arduino and you can start writing your code there. There are tons and tons of examples online and tutorials on learning how to work with this stuff. And um, as far as writing very low level code, like what runs on an Arduino, I still consider myself a complete beginner to this type of stuff, because it's a very different type of style that you write that code than it is the type of stuff I do in my day job, where I'm listening to events of requests coming in to a web server. When you're running code on an Arduino, it's basically in this very tight loop, actually kind of similar to a video game. So if you've ever done something like that, you have a game loop. Basically, the application starts, and then you just go into a loop and decide what you're going to be doing at that moment in time.
I was just about to say that, or something like Windows service also as well. On start, on stop, on running. Then you can kind of control those three events, and then you can plug into those. But what are some of the projects that you did? I mean, so this is like your hobby type of thing. So I'm sure there are a lot of projects that you kind of worked on the side, like to get this running, right? And
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So most recently, something that I worked on, actually kind of as a demo. So I did this project with different types of technologies, and so um, one that I worked on recently was to understand how I squared C works, and that's a specific protocol for data sharing. And so what I took was a ambient light sensor, and so this would uh, basically just receive the level of light, find out how bright it is in the room or the outside, wherever you are, and then that would just give a number to the Arduino. So, um, working with this sensor, I was very um, worried because I had never worked with I squared C before, and like I said, I feel very new to this type of stuff, even though I've been working with it for a couple of years. And um, I go online on Wikipedia and I read about it, and I get the very technical definition. I squared C is a communication protocol for sharing data between two devices, blah blah blah. All that kind of stuff. But I got to say, I once I was done with that project, I was very happy to learn that it was actually very simple, and probably all of the other messaging protocols are probably very simple, just like everything else we work with, even in higher level languages. So it's all it is just sending and receiving a byte array type of deal. You're in charge of figuring out which byte means what. Index 0 means this, index 1 means this, that kind of thing. Um, but the application that I worked on there was just to turn a light on or off. So if it's dark in the room, if the ambient light is very low, then let's turn a light on, and then the opposite is true. So if it's if the sun is coming through the window, we don't actually need a light on, then make sure that light is off, that sort of deal. So that's one of the things I've worked on there. Another project I've worked on recently that actually took me a long time to figure out because of just kind of learning how the electronics part of this works. And honestly, whenever I'm working on these types of projects, that's where the heavy work is just, for me at least, understanding the hardware itself. Um, so I don't know if you've ever messed with kind of how a remote control works, for like a TV remote control. Um, but if you're pressing a button, the way that works is the light bulb on the front of the remote is an infrared light, and the way that it communicates is by sending the data over the infrared signal to the receiver in the TV. And all it's doing really is just turning that light on and off really really fast, like in the nanosecond speed. So um, like way faster than what we are used to, right? Usually when we're programming, you're probably, maybe the fastest you're measuring something is in milliseconds, not nanoseconds, 1,000th of a millisecond. So in my mind, that's still crazy. But yeah, so the project there was basically just sending a signal with the infrared LED from one board to the other one, and then interacting based off of that. So depending on the signal that you receive.
So, you're a C#.NET developer, just like I am. I mean, I worked with C and C++ in my college days, but university, but I've, never stuck with it, right? So you had to get back to it. But how long did it kind of take you to get used to the syntax? Did it take you a long time, or just picked up in a day or two and you can program anything in C, C++, or?
Oh no, I'm still working on it. Honestly, I know of people who go back and forth between different programming languages depending on the thing they're working on, and I'm always having trouble. Like, I'm trying to do this thing. Oh nope, that's syntax for C#, not C++, or that style. And actually, something I hadn't mentioned is that Arduino, I guess technically you could think of it like it has its own language. It's really just a subset of C++, and so anything that you type as far as valid C++ works. I think it's the C++ 11 syntax, but uh, anyway, so working with that is, it's really hard to just go back and forth. And um, I did a little bit of C++ in college and a little bit at my first job just outside of college, but there was so much relearning there. On the bright side, there's not a lot that you have to learn of the specific stuff for an Arduino. If you want to actually just write pure C++ and run it on an Arduino, you can do that. I did that for one of my projects, and it was definitely a learning experience. Whenever I can, it's always better to just start doing that code on an Arduino because that is so much easier. The tools are better to work with, and you also have all those tutorials online too. But yeah, as far as syntax goes, honestly, you know, most languages that are C based are pretty simple to get around, but then you have to start remembering all the specifics for how those work. So, and that's always where the gotchas are. Ugh.
Remembering the ampersand, I just came to my mind like in addresses and accessing in memory and like yeah, it's more. But did that kind of make you respect C sharp more, or did you become a better C sharp programmer? Do you think with that?
Um,
Like looking at the lower level, did it make you a better C sharp programmer in a way?
I think it made me a better programmer overall, right? Because those are the types of things that I just don't think about at all when I'm, in the .NET side of things, right? The memory for a specific value is, a reference or something, and being forced to think about that stuff definitely reinforces that, oh yes, this is the stuff I work with every day, but I'm so abstracted away from it. And I got to say, every so often, so lately personally I've just kind of been on this performance kick because I keep reading all this stuff within .NET Core, and all the different types of things that they've been working on to improve the performance there. And then so I ended up buying some books on memory management in .NET, and then writing high performance C sharp code, that kind of stuff. And I have to say, whenever I'm writing code on that C++ level, my mind, immediately start thinking of how to make this as fast as possible, especially because it's an 8-bit CPU. It needs to be performant. Um, so now in my mind, I think that kind of ruined me for writing code a little bit on the C sharp side, because I see things, I'm like, this could be a little bit faster. Let me just rewrite a couple of lines right here. Okay, and now it's going to be like 10 nanoseconds faster, I'm sure, probably, right? But nothing actually noticeable. But now I'm seeing that all over the place.
Well, it didn't ruin you. I mean, my problem is that I grew up and I don't know, maybe I'm too old for programming. I don't know. I mean, the way they taught us like is we had to think about memory, we had to think about loops and executions and what's the complexity of the function and blah 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 and so on and so forth. Not a complexity, we call it complexity, but it's time. Like how much time? Is it does it have to loop once or does it have to loop n on the power of n times or something like that. But and the developers today, the younger ones at least, they don't think about that. And the way even the companies they have approach, oh, CPU is cheap, oh, memory is cheap, so we just might as well like just throw more computers at it and then it'll do the calculation, right? But recently I had a problem where we had we're doing some kind of data collection and it's like for some data mining research. There's a lot of calculations going on at the same time, and then you figure out that there's like 15 for loops of the same same thing, right?
Mhm.
So it's looping through the same set like a million times. So then you can like I refactor the entire code, and from 2 hours that it took to run this code and ran it in 2 minutes, right? So not that drastic, but still it was drastic. It was noticeable because it was taking away time from the processor, and especially the AWS hosting and stuff like that. They charge per megabyte. I don't know. They're crazy with their charging, so they charge you for everything. So it saves money in that way. So that kind of thinking I encourage nonstop, and I try to make other developers think yes, everything's cheap and expensive, but still, if you write a bad code, um, it'll explode on you later down the road, and it'll create some weird bugs that you don't know of. Especially like in game programming, which would kind of be the same in Arduino's way. If you write a program that has a memory leak, right? you're not disposing of something on some object that you created or something like that, and you keep it in memory, you just keep dumping in it, eventually it'll clog out and just die on you, right? So it's kind of hard for you to kind of figure out what the bug is, because usually when it breaks because of memory overload, you don't know why it kind of where exactly why it broke. So debugging that will take you forever. So you have to be conscious of that. And I'm glad to hear it from you. Like, yes, you learned a lot, but believe me, I mean, my suggestion is just own that skill, and then uh, don't forget that, right? Just write code that is, besides being pretty and all that jazz and readable, write a code that, it's what's the word? I'm trying to look for a word, but it executes, normal times, and it's, saves resources and stuff like that. So it kind of builds up.
Oh, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, performant code is. I feel like it's becoming important again. Like like you said, right? There was a point, with computing where whenever we started with all this for so long, the CPU cycles were super important, and now they're kind of less important. Like, to be honest, if I were to write an application, I care way less than someone would have cared 20, 30 years ago. But at the same time, especially I think because so many companies are moving to the cloud and we're paying by the minute and that kind of stuff, based off of resources. Like, now we actually see the cost of slow, bad running code from that perspective, right? So yeah, it's definitely a skill that's going to be more in demand later on.
I think you're absolutely right. You nailed it on the head with that one. Um, so with that being said, so you like doing this basically IoT. So you're also one of the organizers of the Orlando IoT and part of that team. Could you tell us a bit about Orlando, IoT meetup and what it is, what its mission is, and how do people like it, and how it's expanding, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the three organizers. There's myself. There's Jared Porcellic, who you've had on your show a while ago, and then there's a third member, Garrett, who is also very involved. And so, kind of historically, Jared was kind of the main person running the meetup group, and I actually just kind of joined a year ago, not too long after moving to Orlando. And so as far as a meetup group, we meet once a month, and we'll have one or two speakers, come down and talk about something, either a project they've worked on or something to that effect. And the goal is, like most meetups, I assume, to just kind of foster that community of IoT, of knowledge, and kind of awareness too of the space and the fact that these are the types of things that you could do with these types of technologies. And thankfully, IoT is enough of a blanket statement sort of technology that you can kind of fit a lot of things in there. So that does kind of help finding speakers, honestly. um, but also, as an organization, we're going through the process right now to become a nonprofit, and so that way we can kind of start doing more with the community. So like I said previously, or historically, we've done just meetups, and so we want to start doing other things, and becoming a nonprofit just kind of makes paperwork for other events and that kind of stuff a lot easier.
yeah, there are a lot of things that quote unquote IoT can be applied, and even the acronyms look different. Everyone says it different. Someone says Internet of Things, someone says this and that. So it's, but to me, like, yeah, quick question: how how easy it is to set up a gyroscope sensor uh with Arduino?
To be honest, so I've never worked with one. If I were to like start right now, I would probably go online, find a tutorial for that, and mostly just kind of copy paste and go through those steps. My assumptions for a gyroscope would be that there are probably a couple of pins coming from the gyroscope board that you would plug into your Arduino, and from there, you would just, within your loop within the Arduino code, you would just continually query that gyroscope board. Hey, what's the value right now? So depending on the board, it might be giving you that data off of a different protocol. So I mentioned I squared C earlier. That's a popular one. There's another one called SPI. I think it's pronounced SPY. I'm not too sure on that, to be honest. So that's where things I
Okay.
think can get a little iffy. But I would imagine, just a gyroscope board, probably fairly simple, probably straightforward. Not as easy as plugging in, an LED bulb to turn the light on and off, but I'm sure there are plenty of tutorials online.
Yeah, I have this crazy idea I want to try out. Like, I have I'm wearing a prosthetic leg, right? So I need to hook up. I want to hook up like gyroscopes, and I'm just so curious to see. Like, I want to do some measurements on it. So that's one of the things I've been pondering in my mind, and I'm definitely going to start going to the meetups, like, so I can start picking up stuff, because I want to, in a way, what I want is improve my life in a way, and and that's kind of a good segue, but so learning something new, how important it is for you to like learn something new. Are you constantly on the prowl to learn something new, or you just like to improve the skills, not improve, but brush up the skills that you have at the moment?
Yeah, so my take, I talk to a lot of people um, who like learning something new, and I think my take is very similar in that I like making stuff. Like that's what got me really into technology in general. I wanted to make a robot, like I said, but whenever I work on a side project or something, it's always because I have this idea for something and I want to make it. I want it to exist in the world, and as far as keeping up to date on skills, that's when I think, oh, okay, well, I've heard of this other thing. Let me use it for this. And I think that it's important to know, at a minimum, know that these other things exist. Because when you want to start working on a project, that's the perfect time to really dive deep into it. um I like many other people probably have this never ending list of technologies that you want to look into and learn, right? Like, I want to get better with X, Y, and Z. And um you know it's so hard to just keep up to date with things, especially when maybe I heard about um some technology and that was 2 years ago, and now it's very different. Maybe it's way better. And it's hard to choose to learn some things when it's something that you're not actually going to be using. So I kind of try to take that pragmatic approach of um, keep up to date a little bit with it and know about it. So it's kind of what I use Twitter for, really, just to follow a lot of people and see some announcements, throw the links into my pocket list, and I'll read them later eventually. I think I have like 60 articles right now in Pocket, so at some point I'll get through them all. But I wouldn't say that I love to learn stuff like some people do, but I love making stuff, and learning other things along the way always feels nice, because especially the concept of learning something new is also to uh, make something easier, right? A newer technology usually makes it a lot easier to do X or whatever that thing is, and so it always feels nicer to do this thing in 2 steps instead of 3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing the same kind of way, but I started building like a library of things, and I have like a queue of books that I started reading, right? And one of the things is like, clean code to help with the code reviews and architecture stuff, and then now I start getting in more into like management stuff and to learn about that. So I'm trying to stay on top of things like as much as I can. So I'm kind of always had this fear like of my knowledge running stale in a way, and that's because every day there's a new library, there's a new thing coming out, and the front end changes. Like, for example, every year there's a new thing that is the latest. Today it's React, tomorrow it's Vue, and so on and so forth. Um, But so you do, you have an 8-hour job, you have a hobby, how, and you have a podcast on top of that. So how do you get the time for all of that?
um,
How do you organize it?
Usually just kind of by the seat of my pants, and I'll hope for the best, honestly. um, no, I mean it's tough, right? Because we're adults. We want to do things with family, spouses, that kind of stuff, and um, it's hard to do all of this other stuff because there's so many things that you want to do. And I gotta say, for me, the thing that I've kind of found is accidentally doing everything kind of in waves. Like, um, for example, I do, I have my podcast, and I need to edit episodes, and it's easier to just kind of plan like, okay, this is going to be a week where my free time goes to editing episodes, or this is going to be the week where my free time will go towards, um, working on this side project I've been wanting to, or this is the week where I'm just going to play video games. I installed a new one, and let's have fun with that. So, um, I kind of do like having that plan to a degree. Like this week, right now, my plan is podcast related things and video games. So I'm switching that up. I reinstalled something, so I want to play it. But other than that, that's kind of where it really goes. You gotta find that time somewhere. But yeah, wish I had a cooler answer, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool answer, and what kind of I'm looking for as well. Like, I kind of plan my week per day. I'm kind of planning day ahead. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna do this. So I'm not doing it on a weekly basis, but I'm doing it on a daily basis because I know kind of the milestone of the week. So that's kind of what I said to myself. Like, yeah, I need to do some band practice because I recently, quote unquote, I mean, a bit of sidetrack. I switched on bass. Besides doing the vocals, and now I'm doing the bass, right? So now I need to practice bass as well, and then learn all the songs because it's not the same when you just sing. Now you need to learn to play them as well. So I'm kind of splitting up my time. Okay, today I'm going to practice. Tomorrow I need to do editing of the episodes. The day after that I have an interview with Al, and so on and so forth. So that's how I kind of go approach that. Um, do you know, like, at the top of your head, like, what is the last thing you learned? It can be or cannot be related to programming. I mean, whatever you think, but is there anything that you kind of learned and like had an epiphany moment? Like, hey, okay, I learned this.
Ooh. So all right, so it's probably Pulumi is a tool that I worked with about a month or two ago, somewhere in that time frame. So I don't know if you've heard of it. Pulumi, Pulumi, I think is how it's spelled. And um, so I don't know if how things work on AWS. You mentioned AWS, so I'm assuming you use that. I'm more of an Azure guy as far as how the cloud stuff that I use, and so within Azure, if you want to automate a deployment, then the way that you do that is you create what's called an ARM template, and it's just this giant XML file that has the things that you're going to be deploying, and then there's also some like input parameters that you can change when you want to change certain values and things like that. And so once you get it set up, it's pretty easy, but if you want to edit it, you're editing a giant XML document. And like I said, I don't know what AWS is using, and there are probably pros and cons to whatever solution that is. But recently, I played with Pulumi, and the idea there is that it's this tool that you type up in code what is going to be deployed. And so the way it runs is it actually kind of like you type out your code, and I chose to use TypeScript, but they have tools for different languages. Go, I know, is one, and just plain JavaScript. There's a handful out there, but I typed up what I'm deploying, and I deploy an Azure function and a queue and a couple of other things, and then I tell Pulumi to run, and so then based off of the code that I ran or that I typed up, it uses that to generate the output of what it's going to deploy, and then it deploys that out to the cloud. And so they have this tool for Azure, AWS, Google's cloud, which I keep forgetting, GCP, I want to say, and then a handful of others too. I believe they've added for different types of cloud providers too. And so it's a super useful tool that if you do cloud deployments, I recommend them now, honestly, just because I can't look at ARM templates anymore now that I know that this other tool exists.
Yeah, I will definitely check it out. I mean, on my end, I would love to use Azure. Let me put it like that, because deployment through Azure is way easier on a lot of things. But first of all, the pricing, and second of all, there are a lot of different things, different technologies that we have running at the same time. So it's not just .NET. There's all sorts of, I mean, it goes down even to VB script. I mean, VB .NET. So it's like all over the place. So we kind of have to support everything. And then AWS kind of, like, out of all the hosting solutions, AWS kind of made the most sense to us. So, and oh my God, it's 1 hour that we talk. I mean, I really enjoy the talk, by the way. So really, thank you for coming in on the show. And I would like to end it like, can you plug in about OrlandoIoT? Can you plug in about you? Where can people find you and the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you definitely for having me on the show. I had a ton of fun. I didn't even notice we've been talking for over an hour. So, this has been great. But yeah, if anyone out there wants to find me, the best place online is Twitter. I am Programmer Al. That's the name that I've chosen. I try to use that in just about anything online. And then that's also the name of my personal website, my blog, that I ignore very regularly, which I should probably blog more. But you can also find the Orlando IoT meetup online on OrlandoIoT.com or just on meetup.com. If you just go to Meetup and search for Orlando IoT, you can find us there. We try to have a meetup just about every month. Maybe we'll skip a summer or winter month. Just, people go on vacation, that kind of stuff. And then finally, if you want to hear my ramblings on other podcasts, I'm the host of Developer SideQuests, interview style show similar to this, but we talk just about people's side projects that they're working on. And then also, if you're interested in Marvel movies or TV shows, I also co-host the MCU Rewind podcast.
Oh, wow. But yeah, I mean, thank you again. Thank you again for taking the time. I really enjoyed our talk. I think we had a lot of good points, and I think it'll be helpful to other people to also listen to. I'll make sure in the show notes we plug in all the links as well, so you can check it out. And thank you again, Al. Thank you again for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
And that concludes another episode of Backhand Bear Podcast. I really had a good time talking to Al. It really got me interested in IoT, and I can't wait to tinker around. I hope that I'll have some spare time in the future so I can deal with that. So there are a couple of projects that I would like to work on, and I hope it got you interested in IoT as well, and you would like to check it out. Also, if you're in the Orlando area, show up on a meetup. I'll be there probably on one of them at least. I'll try to, depending on the schedule, but I hope. And all of the links that Al mentioned, I'm going to plug in the show notes. And if there are any other questions or concerns, feel free to ask me at backandbear.com. And then comments, any comment that you have. You can say great job, or you can say you suck. I mean, I don't care. Just give me some feedback. And that's it for this week, and hope to see you next week. And until then, ta-da! Thank you for listening to an episode of Backend Bear Podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Backend Bear and on Facebook at Backend Bear Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to send them via Twitter or just email me at marco@backendbear.com. Any other information or anything that you would like to know, it can be found at backendbear.com. Thank you again, and until next time, ta-da!